Welcome, visitor, to this production on Charles Darwin National Park 2007. I also spent a short time here in July 2006, but the later visit was more thorough. I spent a month in September 2007 in the Hidden Valley Caravan Park, and with an electric wheelchair I traveled on the Palmerston-Darwin cycle route into town, passing the Army and RAF bases on the way. The number of plaques and historical displays along the cycle route, which follows the old Pine Creek railway line. This one celebrates the 2nd 14th Field Regiment, which came to Darwin during the 1940s to protect Northern Australia. Also along the cycle route is bus stops, and Darwin buses all carry wheelchairs. They're also well illustrated with artwork done by local artists. Decision time, a split in the cycle route. I decided to head over towards Charles Darwin Park. Another interesting thing along the cycle route is remains of the old water pipeline. I've reached the park, and here's the welcome flag. The park is actually an old bomb storage area from World War II, which was used until the mid-1980s. It protects the wetlands and provides a magnificent view of the central business district of Darwin. The park, like the city, is named after the world-famous naturalist Charles Darwin. In fact, there's still a tortoise brought by Charles Darwin to Darwin over 100 years ago, and it's alive today. This park brochure tells me that the park protects areas of natural and cultural significance, protects the wetlands. Port Darwin's recognized as a nationally significant wetland because of its size, 48 square kilometers. The park lies on Francis Bay in Port Darwin, and includes the western banks of Saggroves Creek, Rycard Creek, and part of Blessers Creek. So there's mainly two things to see in the park. First of all, the lookout platform with wonderful views of the harbor and wetlands, and the World War II display, which we'll take a look in this production, open daily. Here's the view of the central business district of Darwin, taken from the lookout tower. They're quite elevated over the harbor, so the view is really very good. Exploring around the park, there's lots of evidence of the old military installations, such as this cliff. And these old staircases leading nowhere with the buildings long gone. Some of the buildings have been condemned because of asbestosis or asbestos. We're welcomed to a historical display by this reminder of the World War II bombs that were stored here. There's 15 or 20 or who knows, even more maybe, old bunkers well spaced out, but only one or two have displays. Please come in. 1944, when the place was built, it was well away from the town of Darwin because it stored explosives. This place was dangerous, secret, and off limits to civilians. Darwin was the target for the Japanese in the expansion of their empire up to 1942. The red marks on the map show where bombs were dropped. February 19, 1942. 242 Japanese bombers dropped more bombs on Darwin than were dropped at Pearl Harbor. Destruction caused by the bombers was pretty complete in areas. The extent of the Japanese Empire in December 1941 and its very rapid expansion in the next 2 months. The Japanese were really not very far away from northern Australia. Darwin today is still a major military defense base for northern Australia. Working with explosives and a poster saying that firearms kill the enemy, not your friends. A poster on managing ammunition stores safely. November 1943, checking 1,000-pound bombs in the bulk underground storage. Bomb trolleys were used to move heavy bombs. They carried 1,000-pound bombs like these, as well as 250 and 500-pound bombs. Rosemary has been used to enhance memory since ancient times, but it was worn on Anzac days to remember Gallipoli. People who were planning Darwin's future in the 1940s had absolutely no idea of what the city would be like today. A poster on cultural differences between the Japanese and Australians and the different views that each nation held towards soldiers. This poster outlines the use of this area since the 1940s. It was to continue in use until the bombs were moved to the new military bases during the mid-80s. Thanks for joining me, dear visitor, on this visit to Charles Darwin National Park in the Northern Territory. I hope you have a great day. Good day, visitor. This short show is about a trip from Charles Darwin Park to Pugh and into central Darwin, and an exploration of Dr. Skelly and the Darwin Esplanade. Charles Darwin National Park is known for its wetlands and birds. I reached the Palmerston-Darwin cycle route that follows the old Pine Creek railway line at the Pratt Water Tower. There's a historical display at the water tower showing the view from the top in 1941. The water is carried by pipes above ground, and they've been decorated by primary school students. I was intrigued that their artwork was on one side and their names were on the back of the pipe. What a lovely way to commemorate a great day out to do some art. All the bus stops along the route were also decorated with artwork. Some of the artwork really captures the character of Darwin and the Northern Territory. A photograph showing the section of the cycle route. I passed a very interesting site. It's an old derelict building with the parkland around it filled with the remains of derelict planes. I don't know the story of this. It's quite an industrial wasteland. The route that I'm on follows the old Pine Creek railway line, and there's an old and vandalized sign outlining the story of the Pine Creek Railway. It was constructed in the 1880s to support the gold fields of Pine Creek, with the intention one day to be extended south to Alice Springs and Adelaide. 16th of July 1888, the first locomotive Silverton completed service to Adelaide River. It was hoped that Darwin would become a metropolitan centre servicing a vast hinterland, with the railway being extended south. But with the decline of the goldfields in the 1890s, the railway no longer became productive. The line used to be called the Never Never Line because it didn't run on time. Hopes were raised when South Australia relinquished the Northern Territory and it was acquired by the Commonwealth in 1911 The Commonwealth also received the Palmerston to Pine Creek Railway. The railway was extended to the town of Catherine in 1913 and then reached Burdham in 1929. This was the end of the line for the next 70 years. The railway gained a lot of use during the Second World War with the transport of military supplies north, but was running a large deficit during the 1970s and was closed in 1976. The line was abandoned in October 1980. During the late 1980s and early 1990s, the old ties and railways were removed. In the mid-1990s, the Northern Territory and local government implemented a program to develop a system of cycle paths throughout Darwin to Palmerston, and this route travels much of the old Pine Creek alignment, explaining the reason for the nice concrete bridges. I've reached the Esplanade. It's backed by large five-star hotels that overlook Darwin Harbor. The Esplanade is a beautiful parkland which overlooks the harbor. To the right is Dr. Scully, my next point of call after I look at some of the monuments. A sign tells me that fish feeding at Dr. Scully is a very popular tourist attraction, with hundreds of large and small fish coming in from the ocean at feeding time. Other things to see include the festivals and parades along the parklands of the Esplanade and Lamoureux Beach. A monument to the Leichhardt expedition. I learned that Frederick Ludwig Leichhardt, naturalist and explorer, came with a party of pathfinders from Brisbane to reach Port Essington in 7th of December 1845. Their trek, lasting 14 months and 17 days, was a great physical achievement and of major importance to Australia, resulted in the discovery of many streams and large areas of grazing land. Some of the rivers that were discovered by Leichhardt There's some very interesting interpretive signs, such as this one, Ocean Views Hide History, referring to sunken wrecks in the harbor. The shimmering surface of Darwin Harbor hides the remains of ships that were sunk during the Japanese air raids on Darwin Harbor the 19th of February 1942. One in particular was the U.S. ship, the Perry. The destroyer, the USS Perry, suffered the greatest loss of life. The ship suffered 4 direct hits from Japanese bombs and quickly became an inferno, sinking stern first. A view of the USS Perry on fire. A number of items have been salvaged from the Perry, including one of the 4-inch guns which I'll show you. I enjoyed talking to this gentleman for a half hour or so. The gun was unveiled in 1992 and has been on display ever since. There are many other displays of Darwin's military past, particularly during the Second World War. This plaque celebrates Second Lieutenant Robert Pugh, a fighter pilot who was shot down February 15, 1942. Let's take a look at the harbor's edge. This interpretive sign tells me about the tidal levels and the different types of trees that grow along the shoreline. I learned that the harbor provides a home for thousands of different species of plants and animals that have to adapt to a total tidal range of about 8 meters. Darwin's harbor is almost 1,000 square kilometers in extent. It's formed by the drowning of several major river systems after the Ice Age. Fringing the harbor is 20,000 hectares of mangrove forest, the largest single stand of mangroves in the Northern Territory. About 30 different species of mangrove grow here. I'm quite intrigued by the interpretive sign, Ships and Sunsets. It identifies the various types of ships that you see on Darwin Harbor. These include patrol boats, military frigates, prawn trawlers and ferries, and oil rigs. Darwin enjoys spectacular sunsets. In the dry season, atmospheric smoke and dust filters the fading sunlight and strengthens the reddish tones of the sky. In the wet season, storm clouds and lightning displays can be very dramatic. I head over towards the entrance to Dr. Skelly. It's marked by the YMCA. It's one of the chic backpacker places to stay at in Darwin, and it's very close to the central business district. There's quite a steep hill going down to the harbor. We pass some World War II fuel storage tanks. There's quite a long history attached to Dr. Skelly, including the first landing, Pugh's well, and the government gardens, as well as the old hospital. The area has a spring of fresh water, came to the attention of early sailors as a place to stop for water. In the 1870s, serious outbreaks of malaria led to the building of a hospital. Built with public subscription, it was opened in 1874. Dr. Pugh discovered the water in 1869, and the area became a site for Chinese gardens, market gardens, and Chinese settlement with the Chinese temple. During the Second World War, it became the site for the RAF CARAVAN flying boats. Following the war, the site was abandoned by the military. Carl Atkinson operated out of Dr. Scully. He had the rights to salvage many of the World War II wrecks. Dr. Scully, during the Second World War, was also the site of an anti-submarine net supported by buoys that were controlled from here. Some of the old buoys and winching equipment remains on display. The Arakia nation, the indigenous peoples, also have signs up. The first Chinese arrived in 1874. By 1888, they outnumbered the Europeans 6-1. They occupied Dr. Scully as the market garden area between 1874 and 1929. Because of the large number of Chinese, a Chinese temple was constructed in the foreshore area of Dr. Scully. This fisherman's temple was known by several names. It was referred to as a Hakka temple, a North Chinese word meaning guest people. This photograph of the fisherman's temple was taken during the 1930s. There's a prayer furnace off to the right. One of the curious finds in Darwin was the finding in 1879 of a small pinite statue lodged in the roots of a large banyan tree. The discoverer didn't announce the find for many years, and it wasn't until 1928 that it was identified as the image of the Taoist immortal Shou Lai, god of longevity. I popped into the rock center. It allows you to climb up the walls of one of the old World War II oil storage tanks. Quite an active center and quite exciting. Well, I decided to have a look at Pugh as well. They do have a wheelchair entrance to it, as well as a staircase. Some old scrap in the tropical rainforest there. Not sure what it was. Time to move on, back to the Esplanade and Darwin. There are a great many tourist sites in this area. An excellent large bulletin board on the history of settlement of Darwin, focusing on the different groups that make up the community today. Of course, the Aboriginals were the first settlers, followed by the grazers from South Australia and the Chinese migrants to work in the gold fields and the pearl diving industry. Some excellent shots of the Arakia people. The gold rush attracted 8,000 Chinese people. By 1888, they outnumbered the Europeans almost 10-1. Pastoral expansion to the top end from 1878 brought stockmen from the eastern and southern Australian colonies. An important event was the construction of the overland telegraph line between 1870 and 1872 through Alice Springs from Adelaide, put Darwin in communication with the rest of the world. Afghan Cavaliers helped build the overland telegraph line. They later supplied the necessities of life to the telegraph repeater stations along the route. Once the overland telegraph reached Darwin, it was later extended to London via Java and Ceylon, or Sri Lanka. This map shows the population growth, the big growth occurring during the 1960s and 1970s until Cyclone Tracy, 1974, and then the growth resuming. From 1976 onwards, waves of refugee boat people arrived, mainly from Vietnam and Timor. Cyclone Tracy, of course, caused enormous devastation in 1974 and led to the evacuation of about 45,000 people. Population reduced to 6,000. A very nice display again on the Arapia, or saltwater people. Information on their food include different shells dug out of the sand and mud. A favorite here was the cockle, which were roasted on the coals of the fire. The surrounding vine forest provided shelter. Wickham Point provided a year-round source of food, medicine, shelter, weapons, and other items. A map showing the location of Wickham Point, a middle arm, which will be looked at next. A write-up about the history of middle arm, alias Wickham Point, was discovered by a surveyor named Goiter during the Second World War. It was the site of a military base and training camp. Wickham Point is now used as a shipping point for natural gas and also as a healthy haven for local flora and fauna. The tropical estuarine, mangrove and salt marsh environment of Wickham Point provides a nursery habitat for water birds, fish, insects, and jellyfish. The mangrove forests provide protection from storm surges and coastal erosion and improves water quality by acting as a sink for sediment and nutrients. The construction of Darwin Liquefied Natural Gas Plant, LNG, at Wickham Point commenced in 2003. The first export of gas occurred 2006. Another industrial wharf on Darwin Harbour. A look at Peak Hill. It was allocated as a secret training area. In 1942, an area of East Arm was developed as a secret base for operatives sent to infiltrate Japanese-occupied islands to the north. Apparently there was a leopard treatment hospital there as well. Thanks, visitor, for joining me on this visit to the Esplanade in central Darwin. I only did the interpretive signs around Dr. Skelly. There's lots more that I haven't touched, but that's enough for today. Have a great day.